guys, my name is Amin and welcome to another video about real-world microservices. On this video, I want to implement real-world microservice project using unique framework that helps you implement real-world enterprise projects such as microservices with DDD and all this stuff. With unique framework which helps you develop microservices and DDD. So, before I start, I want to mention that this video is part 1 of our microservice journey, implementing real-world microservice project, and on the next video, I want to tell you about advanced communication in microservices. And if you didn't watch my previous video about enterprise architecture, so please watch it first because architecture that we want to use on this project on there. So let's start. Let me tell you about the framework that we're gonna use. Zamin, developed by Urman. He's a very good teacher and very good programmer, and he has a lot of knowledge. I will link the reference of this page on description. So if you wanna check this framework, so use the link. If you want my advice, go through all these classes on project and learn it. It will teach you a lot because this framework is best practice. So improve your knowledge about microservices and .NET framework. Don't miss it, and check all these classes on this project, and remember that by practicing this project and see how he implemented, you will learn a lot. We're gonna use this framework. It's too small to say framework, it's kinda library. So we're gonna use this library and implement real-world microservice. So let's start. Mr. Ruman has been created some Zamin template package which helps us avoid repeating ourselves or creating a project, and it's a template that we can use to create onion architecture for enterprise applications, which I taught you about in my previous videos. Go to NuGet and search for Zamin solution.template, and we have to install this command first. We have to execute this command to install this template. So I have a real-world.eshop folder right here, and I'm gonna open the terminal right here and paste the command to install Zamin template. I've already installed it, so if you didn't try it, then it will install. So we can use .NET new -- list to see all the templates that has been installed on your computer. We have Zamin SLN right here. .NET new Zamin SLN. You can create new Zamin template project. You can use .NET new Zamin SLN -n for naming it. And I want to create customer service first. Before I create customer service, first I wanna create a folder named services, and I wanna create my project right here. Okay, let me just run this command right here. We're gonna create this customer services that we are developing. Most of the tutorial told you that you have a services folder and all your microservices are in there, but in enterprise application for developing microservices, because on microservices, each services must have their own developers and their own team to develop. For example, you have customer service, order service, and shipping service. Each one of them must have their own unique developers team. For example, Team A develops order service, and Team B develops shipping service, and Team C develops order service. So by creating a solution and put all your microservices in one place, in one solution, and limiting your developers to one physical path, there will be conflicts on your project, because for example there is 8 microservices on your application, and each microservice has 3 developers. It means 24 people are working on this project, and you gave them a physical access. So it's better to separate your repositories, and I've created customer service, and we need shipping service. Let me just write it. We need shipping services, and let me create it. And our implementation of microservice is real world, but our business is not. We are using simple business that we are developing for our microservices. We are using the simple business for developing this microservice. We are not developing the whole microservice. It's gonna be time consuming, and we don't have enough time for it. I want to just give you information that you need to develop microservices on real world for big scale enterprise application. Like this video and share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe my channel and leave a comment. So let's continue. So we create customer and shipping service, so let's create order service too. Order services. Order service. Let's create order service. Okay, we've created these 3 microservices. Let's open order service first. I wanna start with order service. I'm gonna open it on Rider. So let's open it. I'm using Rider, but you can use Visual Studio too. I'm just comfortable around Rider. So as you see, Mr. Urman has been put some feature named blog on our project, on this template project, to teach us about the relation between these layers and the simple view of this enterprise architecture, which we are gonna use on enterprise level. So let me just put it on ship yes and run it and see what will happen. Okay, the build has been successfully done. This project is fine, so we can start our job. We are developing domain-centric project. Our architecture is domain-centric. So first we have to start by domain. I wanna add order feature to our project. But first let me delete this blog file, and so I've deleted the blog file, so let's start. As I said before, we are doing domain-centric application, so we're gonna start with our domain. I want to create order features. We are separating our folders by features. So first thing that I want to do is add orders directory to my domain project. So why separating our folders by feature? Because it's more modular. We can transforming to other projects. It helps us better on development. You will see. It's easier to read and it's more cleaner. I love it. But you can separate your folder by the behavior. So I'm gonna add entities to my order directory. So you can have value object, enums, entities, and all these features that we have on our domain. So let me create order aggregate. So let me just name it order. Okay, let me create it. And as I said before, we are using Zamin, and Zamin provides some classes that helps us to avoid repeating ourselves for developing aggregate root and entities. All this building block, we are not repeating ourselves to creating building block like aggregate root and entities. So I'm gonna inherit my order from aggregate root, which is on Zamin, as I said before. If you look on aggregate root, we have list of iDomain events, name events, and this aggregate root inherited from entities, which allows us to access all the entity behavior that we have. But aggregate root contains events, and we have some apply, mute, and add events, get events, and clear events, which helps a lot on developing microservices, which they are event-driven design. So I'm gonna clean my code. So I have three region here. I wanna write it clean. I have properties, constructor, and methods. All of properties are our order are going to be on here. Constructor gonna be here, and methods to change the state of our properties must be here. As you know, the other classes cannot change the behavior of order, and it have to be done by methods to change the state. And I have a customer ID property, and I have to add it. But first, let me just tell you, when you are inheriting from entity on Zamin, you have ID, you have business ID. You don't need to implement it. ID is for SQL features, and business ID is for, and we are using business ID for our key value, and it's the main value that we are using to detect the entities. But ID is for just SQL and entity framework. So we are using business ID. So we have business ID value object is value object. Let me just show you. It's a value object that generates GUID and helps me a lot. So we are using it. So let me just create property name with business ID type, and let me name it customer ID. And all of our properties must be private sets, because you know it's a rule of aggregate root. I need to create at and order lines for my properties. So let me just add the create as property on here. So where is private sets? Private sets. Okay, so it's better to create value object for each unique type on your business, but I don't have really advanced business on my project. I'm using simple business, so I'm not gonna waste your time on creating this value object. But if you're doing a real world business, so implement your value object, please. And I need constructor. Each time that my order has been created, I have to have constructor, but I cannot allow other class to decide when is create at. My business says that create at is a time that order has been created, so I have to do it on constructor. If you have some properties here, and it must have some business rule and some behavior to change the state of property, implement those properties like here. For example, you have customer service, order service, and shipping service. Each one of them must have their own unique developers team. For example, team A develops order service, and team B develops shipping service, and team C develops order service. So I need order line entities. Order line. Let me create it. And it's still on orders aggregate, but it's an entity of order aggregate. So I'm gonna inherit it from entity. So my order is my aggregate root, and my order line is my entity. So my business say that all of the orders must have many order lines they want. So I have these properties and constructor and method region right here. So let's go to order line class and see what we have. We have product ID, we have price, we have quantity, properties on our order line. Let me just write it and bring it on this project. So let me just bring these classes on here. I have product ID, I have product ID, I have price, I have quantity. So as you see, I didn't use price value object here. So let's create common directories because the price and quantity are common. I'm gonna put all the share value objects and all the share stuff value objects and all the share stuff on my project on my domain right here. So I have price and quantity. Let me create those classes. First, we're gonna create a class name price, and we have to inherit it from base value object. And base value object is on Zamin. It helps us to develop value objects, and it overrides some behavior like equality and get hash code and all this stuff. So I'm gonna put price on this generic argument, so I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna put it and okay, let's implement value object, price value object. First, we need region name property to clean our code. Each value object has some properties for saving some values, and the US dollar we have to use decimal for our price value. So I'm gonna create decimal property name value. The value of the property must be here. So there are some validation and some factories that must be implemented. I don't want to waste your time to implement this value object, so I've already implemented. Let me bring it to you. So here is it. It is. Let me just explain this to you. Let me just use this namespace first. Okay. So as I said before, we have some properties name value to save the value of the value object. So I have constructor right here and some static method. My constructor gets decimal. It must be 0 or positive. The price cannot be, negative for my business. But on your business, it might be negative. And I have some static method that factories from decimal. And it creates this value object from decimal. And I have some private constructor to create my value object inside my code. So I have some equality checker, and it gets the value, and on the base value object on Zamin, it checks the equality. So I override some operator like explicit and implementing operator to make it easier to create my value object. So instead of this using decimal on my entity, I have to use price value object right here. So I'm going to use it, and equality can be a value object, but I don't want to make it complicated. My business is too simple, and it needs some int. But you can create some value object named equality and check the value object is and check it. Equality is not 0. It must be higher than 1. You have to check it on your value object. So we need to create our constructor right here. So I'm gonna use C_P to create it, and you see the product ID, price ID, and quality has been references to our properties, so they are okay. So if there is something, for example, on here I need to increase my quantity, I have to write method for it. So I have to write public method, public void method name increase quantity. So I'm gonna write it. So let me just write it. Increase quality, increase quantity. So, and I get int increase number, right? Okay, and on quantity I do it like plus equal increase number. Okay, so, and I can have some method named decrease. Decrease quantity and decrease number. Right. And I minus it from. So this is my behaviors, and it seems okay. So you can add your events on here. If you are using event on your microservices, you have to raise an event each time your aggregated state is changed. But I'm gonna explain and implement raising an event and handling it on next video, which is about advanced microservice communication. I will write to add events later. Add events. Okay, so this is it, and I have to reference order line to my order aggregate routes, right? Because I need it. So as I said before, we can't let others change the properties of our code. So I have to use iRead-only collection, and my order has many order lines, so I have to use some collection. So I use iRead-only collection name order line, and I encapsulate it from hash set order line. This is it. We developed our order domain. Let's create our contracts. Then we're gonna create our application service, and then we are done with core layer. We have created domain, order domain features that we needed, like entity and value objects and others. I'm not gonna tell you about all the Xamarin features right now, because on this video I just want to tell you about how to implement microservices on real world. So, but I can do it if you ask me on the comments to create video about Xamarin. I know all of the feature on Xamarin, and I've customized it a lot of time. So we can add events and some other features, but that's for part 2, because I want to tell you about microservice communication, and the important part of microservice is communication, and microservice without communication has nothing. Watch the next part and turn on the ring ring button on YouTube to know about my latest video. But now let's start developing contract. I know a lot of things that I tell you about, like this entity and all this stuff is for DDD, but all the microservices, because the cost of microservice, most of them use DDD to avoid failing the project. So that's why you have to know them. Let's start developing contract project. So as I said before, all of our features are divided by folder. So on each layer, like application service, contracts, and domain, we have to create new directory for our feature. So still our feature is order, so we have to create orders directory. Laptop is so slow, I don't know why. I have to check later. But the reason that we are dividing our features by folder, because it's more modular and we can bring it to other project if it needed to. So on contract, we have two simple folder, command and query. We are using CQRS, we are on microservice, and we need to separate our write and read behavior. So we have to add commands folder for our purposes, commands and query. So queries. The important part is here. Just keep listening. On contract, we have repositories, we have queries and commands, not the handle, just the contract. So first let's start with command. For each command, we have command repository, and for each query, we have query repository. For example, for orders, we have iOrder command repository, and for queries, we have iOrder query repository. So we're not gonna make other folders because they just command and queries. So they have some command and query behavior. So we're gonna create new interface named iOrder command repository. Okay, and we have to implement command repository, and it's a class on Zamin which helps us to create, which has contracts of command repository like insert, get, delete, and all this stuff. You may ask why we have get on command repository. Just think about it. On the CQRS, our databases about query and command, they are separated. So if we need the latest version of data, we need to use the command database. So we have to use this one. So, and I have to pass my entity over here. I do order. It's aggregate root, not entity. So you have to pass your aggregate root for your repository. You can implement your own contract on your repository, but I don't have one. So Zamin contracts works for me. So I'm gonna implement query. So right here, I go add new order query. Repository. So, and I have to implement I query repository. Okay, and Control F. So there's nothing on iQuery repository contract. Why? Just think about it. You have to say what you want to get from your order query. So for example, I need to get some information and I have to name it like select. It's better, and you have to separate it by query behaviors. So the important part is here. Our query, we can't just return entities because we are exposing our domain entities and it's not good. So we can't use entities for this purpose. So what we're gonna do? Just think about it. Okay, done. We have to use DTO. I told you before on view model vs DTO. If you didn't watch, just go and watch it. First, I have to say what kind of use case I have on query. For example, I have to get all the data from database. For example, get orders is my use case on this sample. So I have to create my queries. So get orders query is my query. So I name it get orders query, and all the filter that user have to put on a request. For example, user must give me some information about order ID. For example, I get UID. For example, customer ID. I have to get customer ID from user. So I do it like this. I define a property that gets customer ID, and they are filtered on database. So one user, for example, your user didn't want to filter them. You have to make it null label. So, and for example, I need create date time null label, date time null label, and created at. There are filters that your user pass you through the request, and use these to make some action on your database. So let me just show you. On the select that we wrote, I have to get a parameter. I name it get order query, and I name it query. What it must return is, you can return page data. Page data is a class on Xamarin which helps you to return some pages that has page number, page size, and total count. But what kind of DTO I have to return? You have to tell it. So on get order, you have to define your DTO too. So I say order DTO. So all the property that my order has must be on here to respond to client. So for example, I want to return UID, customer ID, and I want to return prop date time created that. I want to return these fields to user, and I need to return my order line. So I have to create other DTO for order line. So I do it like here, order line DTO. So, and all the property on order line must be here. And remember, your DTO can have some join between two aggregates, and it couldn't use value object because it exposed your domain. So it's important to know that. And let me just, I'm lazy, I want to copy this from here, and yeah, product ID price, all this stuff on DTO, paste. So it's not entity, so it cannot have business ID. I have to use UID, and my price is decimal, and it couldn't be private set because I want to change it to return some stuff. And here we go. And I have on here I have to return order DTO. So our select method, which clients invoke it, must be, it returns order DTO page data. It's page data order DTO, and the user gives us the get orders query, and we use that to return it. But on order DTO, I missed to add prop enumerable of. You can use list enumerable. Which one? Let me use list. Order line DTO. So all your includes from order aggregates could be here. So I name it order lines. Okay, we are good to go. And I can do this, or I can use enable. Which one do you prefer? Okay. And here is our DTO and our select method. Here is our query, and on contract, all the contracts that we needed on project is here, and it's very simple. We don't need any more. We don't need to make it complicated. It has to be simple because we are doing a big scale project. So keep it simple. Let's start with comment. Let's continue with the comment. I have iOrder command repository, but I didn't implement the use case. So I need create order use case. So it creates some order for me. So I need this use case. I'm a business, so I have to implement I have to add the contracts for orders. So I have create order command, and I have to inherit it from iCommand on Xamarin framework. So still, and on here you have to get users information. For example, your user sends you GUID, customer ID. We are defining our contract for outside world to communicate with us. So I need date time. No, I don't need date time because my project gonna create it. But I need prop order lines. So I get a list of order lines, and my order lines, I have to implement it on here on create order folder. I have to create a type that defines the order line command that user is gonna send me. So I'm gonna write it right here. You can use other name instead of command because this isn't your real command, and the outside world and your command must handle by create order command, not order line command. So you can use other names, but I don't have anything in my mind because if I do it order line, it's gonna get complicated with order lines entity. So, and I'm still gonna use this one on order line command. Let me rename it to create order line command. Create order line. Yes, it's better. Create order line command, and I told you you can't use value object, and here you have to use the normal type on C#, and I cannot do it private set because we are doing command and it came from outside world. So on here I use create order line command for type, and I said order lines, and I name it order lines, and like this we defined our command and query contracts, and we have to do our application service. So you might notice that we didn't use any communication with microservices, and it's a start of microservice. But on the next session, I will talk about advanced communication on microservice, and we're gonna add events and all this stuff to our application. Okay, we just implement the contract project. Contract project is where we put our contract interface and all the interfaces and contracts that we use in our application to do some action. But the implementation are on other project, on infra, which is infrastructure, which gives us ability to communicate with outside world. So as you know, the most important part of microservices is communication. And the framework that I told you about, Xamarin, gives you ability to communicate with your services easily. We just finished the contract project, and now it's time for application service. So let's start application service. As you know, application service is a layer that we use it to define our use cases. For example, you need to create something. On contract, we implement the contract of application service like create order command. So we have to implement this use case. We have to implement the create order handler. So creating order is a use case, and all the handlers must be on application service. Like the previous sample, we must create orders directory for our feature. We are doing the rich domain model. So if you are doing the rich domain model, I suggest you to do it like this. But if you aren't, it means that your project is too small to do rich domain model. So it's okay. It's not necessary to do every project on rich domain model. You must decide the project architect must decide how the team must develop the folders and all this. You need a standard development contract in your team. It's a standard between the team developers that says we must develop like this. On the orders, let me add command again, command, and we need queries too. So we are doing CQRS. We must separate out write and read behavior. We are doing queries too. Let me add queries. As I said before, on the microservices, we have events. So if you want to handle some events, you must create events directory right here. And I'm gonna tell you about on next session that we have about advanced microservice communication. But now we just focus on implementing our projects. Okay, I have the use case name create order. So I have to add the use case right here. I add create order. So all your handlers, all your validations must be on application service. So let's start with command handler. So we have create order command handler. So on this class, we implement our command handler and we implement the use case. So on Zamin, we have a class name command handler, which we want to use, and I gave create order command to my generic arguments. So let me implement the missing items. Make it async method. Okay. Look at here. It gives me handle method. It overrides the handler method. So the first thing that I want to do is inject my repository. So I have to define my iRepository field right here. So I do private read only, that's very good. Read only. I order command handler. We are doing command, so we have to use command and order command repository. So let me just use CTOR-F keyword on writer, resharper, which one you use. It helps me a lot. And it injects it itself. It makes our job easier. So we have command right here. We have create order command. The client sends command to us and we have to handle it. We have to create the order on our database. So this is our use case. Creating order. We have to create order. So first define entity. Var entity equal new order. We are doing order aggregate. So new order. So it needs customer ID. So we have customer ID on command that client sends us. So we just pass it to it. So we defined our entity. So and it's time to add order line to our entity. But we didn't define the method. We didn't define add add order line method. So we have to define it first. So region method right here, and doing public void add order line, and we get order line right here, like order line, okay, and we just add it to order line, add order line. Okay, it's good. You can add your events right here, events, but you're not doing it right now. So every state on your entities that change, you must raise an event. So we have the method right here, and we have to for each on the, no, not the for each on the command, create command dot create order lines, and let me name it order line. We defined our method, so I can use entity dot add order line. So we have to create instance of it. So I do new order line, and I have to pass product ID, price, and quantity. So let me add order line dot product ID, order line dot price, order price, not the price, and order line dot quantity. So and this way we add our order line. Let me just do as a comment creating entity. Here I add create entity above my entity. I just want to make it clean, and I want to add comment of create entity and add comment of add order lines. So let the others know what we are doing around here. So we have our entities right here. We have it completely, and we transform our command to our entity. It's time to add it to database. So we have I order command repository right here. We have insert async method on I command repository, and I have to just pass entity to it, and it's async, so we must use await. We have to use await, and I use await order repository dot commit async. What is commit async? So let me explain this part. Insert async is a contract on Zamin which add entity to change the state on entity framework, but you can change it and override it on MongoDB to do something else. It's a contract on here. I will show the implementation of it later. Just know that it's a contract that adds entity to change the state, and commit async is a method that saves the changes and saves the events. Okay, we wrote our command handler, but we missed something. We have to return something for our command handler, and Zamin already took care of it. So we must return async, which is a method on Zamin, and I have to use await because it's asynchronous. So, but what is async? Let me show you. Zamin has some state for command result and command handling. So as you see here, async set the result application service status at OK, and it returns the result. But you have other state too. For example, you can return your own result. If you go to application service status, you can see OK not found, validation error, and invalid domain state and exception. But Zamin handle the exception and validation error by itself. But Zamin gave you ability to customize it for your own use case business. Yeah, you have some business rule that you cannot handle it on validation. So you can write some validation on here, and for example, if I have some domain service and I check my warehouse and see I don't have enough order list, so you can, on that case, you can return your own status with await results async and give your application status, for example, validation error or invalid domain error. But if you wanna add some message to your result, you can use add message method on Xamarin. Look at here, you can use this method. So if I use add message before for example, you check that your warehouse don't have enough product, so you can add your message on here. But mostly my validations are on my create order validation, which we're gonna implement it right now. But Xamarin gives you ability to customize your status. And if you have invalid domain state, or if you have validation error or other errors on your system, on command dispatcher and event dispatcher and query dispatcher and all this level of Xamarin handles your exception. We are using Xamarin. I'm not teaching you all this stuff in Xamarin. We are just using it. If you wanna learn more about Xamarin, just comment me and tell me to record Xamarin ecosystem video. So it's time to write create order validation. Before we execute handler, it goes to validation. So let me just create it. Create order validation. Create order validation. Validator. Create order validator. So on Xamarin, we can use abstract validation, which is a class on Fluent validation. Give your command to abstract validator. So we have create order command right here. We gave it to it. We pass it on generic arguments for abstract validation. So, and right now on constructor, we can define our own rules for this validation. We have rule 4, and I use O dot, for example, customer ID. The customer ID comes from customer service. So we must use some services to check if the customer ID is valid or not. You have many options. You can save the data locally and sync it with events or ETL, which one you prefer and which one is better for you, works for you, which one works for you. Or you can do something better. Use request. You can request your customer service to check the existence of this customer ID. But the problem is here. We are using microservices. You cannot be dependent on other services. So you must cache data from your customer service. And under the case that it fails, you can use that information. Or you can do something better. No, you can not do something. You cannot just request your customer service. You must use service registry, which we're gonna implement on infrastructure layer. First, we need customer services on our project. So on contracts project, I add customer service. I add customers directory, and then I add services. You can add query directory instead of services and implement your service on there, but I prefer to use service directory because I kind of like dividing this stuff. But it's based on your development standard on your team that you're developing your application under. So I add services directory right here, and let me add iCustomer services. iCustomer service. So on here, I have to write my contract for my service request. For implementing exist method on your customer service, you must use query method. But if you are using separated database for write and read behavior, you're gonna have some problem, because if your databases are not synced at the real time and one customer has been created recently, you will have some problem. You can use command exist method on this specific problem, but don't overuse it. You must use query for your read behavior. It's important part. So I use task bool, and I want to name it check customer existent, I guess. So on here I have to pass some query for it. So I write, so let me just define my query. I just have queries folder right here, and I name it check customer existence. Customers existent, or you can write customer existent, and I here and on here I add check customer exist query. Let me just copy this, it's very annoying. Check customer existence query and query, and on here I add property name, GUID business ID, GUID customer ID, and you can add other fields and you can add other properties too for your customer service, but I need just check it with customer ID. So on my customer service I get check customer existence query for my parameter, and I name it query. Okay, we're gonna implement it later, and we have to use service discovery, because if we don't, our services will be dependent, and it's not microservice. We are breaking the rule of microservice. On create order validator, we have to use must async for setting our own rule for checking the customer service existence. So let me add the must async rule right here. Copy this and paste it. So I need customer service, so I have to inject it from constructor of this validator. Customer service. Okay. You can use translator, which is on Xamarin. Translator. If you're developing multi-language API, you have to use translator on Xamarin. My method name is check customer existent, and I have to pass check customer existent query and my customer ID right here. And this is how we defined our rules for must async. But I have to respond some message if my must async invoked. So we have some method name with message and fluent validation. So if on my message, I can just pass anything I want. But if you write your message right here, your code will be hard code. So what should we do? Remember that we had common directory on domains project. So as said, our shared resources on domain will be here. So let me create resource key on here. I can write some resource key for it. And what's resource key? Let me just tell you about it. Resource key. I got resource key here. So let me bring some keys on resource keys. Okay, here. Duplicate value, business ID not found, required field. These are shared keys on my business. We can write it for each feature on your business and divide it with region. So let me just put it on region shared and paste it. I got duplicate value, business ID not found, and required field. I put it on shared region, and you can add other region for your other business resources key. For example, your order have some business error, you can add it right here to show it to your user. I defined my resources key on here, and instead of just returning hard code message, for example, your customer ID doesn't exist, I can use translator on Xamarin. You can use translator to avoiding doing hard code, and it's not just, and you can even use one language and still works. What I mean is the translator helps you avoid doing hard code on your project. Let me just explain iTranslator for you. You can use iTranslator for multiple language on your API, but if you don't want to use multiple language, I still suggest you to use iTranslator because it helps you to avoid doing hard code on your project, for example. And how does it work? You just give the key to it and it gives you some value from your database based on your language that it sets on culture of your application. We have some class on that named culture info. And based on culture info language, I mean, use that culture info to extract some information from your database as a value of your resource key. So if you want to avoid doing hard code, you still must use translator and set the culture info on EN as English on your database. So on with message, I have to use translator, and index parameter, I have to use index parameter and give the key to, you just give the resource key, just give the key that you want to translate, and Xamarin Translate. You can use a string too, but my suggestion is to use resource key for better resource. My suggestion is to use resource keys, which we defined it on our project. Resource key and business ID not found. And instead of using hard code, you just define the keys and just define the scenario on our project, for example, business ID not found. And we're gonna use iTranslator database to set our value for each resource key on our project. So this is how basically iTranslator works, and it helps us a lot to avoid doing hard code. And I have some other rules for my orders, which is for order line. And it couldn't be empty. Must has at least one order line on it. So, and I have to return some message for it. And I still wanna use my translator and my resource key on my project, but I don't have the suitable key and suitable scenario on my keys. So I must add it. I have shared resources and I have special resources for each feature. So on here, I'm gonna add my order region and I'm gonna define my order resources on here. I'm just dividing it to be cleaner and I can develop it later. My keys order line required. Order line required, and I have to set the value on the database later. And I have to use it on my validator. We defined our validator right here, and so let me just give you a hint what will happen if my use case executed. Let me just show it on Paint. So let me explain what will happen each time that user sends a command to our application. First, user sends a command to endpoint. Endpoint sends a command to command dispatcher, and command dispatcher, based on the command that endpoint sends, decides which validator it should use. Then, if the validation was valid, it gives it to handle. And if on the handle everything was okay, it's just then command dispatcher sends based on the command that user sends, decide which validator it should use. And if the validator was okay and it didn't have any domain exception, and the domain exception was okay, it decides which command handle it should use. Then if command handle was okay and it didn't have any validator, then if command handle was okay, it sends the 200 status code. But if there was any domain exception, 500 error. If you remember the application status that I told you about, if this status was not found, it will raise the not found error. But if my application status was validator error, it will send bad request status. But it's important that we are setting the application status, and we can change the HTTP error on endpoint for gRPC, and all this status management will happen on endpoint. So this is basically what will happen on behind of Xamarin, which you don't need to be worried about. And we just finish our core layer, and I just show you what will happen on core layer. So it's better to record the infra and endpoints on part 2. But the part 3 will be about microservice advanced communication. So don't miss part 2, and I hope you liked the part 1. And if you like, please subscribe my channel. Don't forget to like my videos and leave a comment and share it to your friends if you like it.